The story begins in a modest apartment above a busy street in San Francisco. 10 years ago, that's where Raj Kumar started his tech company, coding through sleepless nights while his wife Maya brought him cups of green tea and takeout dinners. They were young, in love, and full of dreams about changing the world through technology. Raj wasn't born into wealth. His parents ran a small grocery store, and he worked there after school, watching his father carefully count every dollar. Those early lessons in hard work shaped him, pushing him to excel at engineering school, where he developed the software that would later become his empire's foundation. Maya met him at a tech conference where she was working as an event coordinator. She fell in love with his passion and vision, not knowing that same drive would later tear their lives apart. Back then, his ambition was charming. The way his eyes lit up when he talked about making technology accessible to everyone, how he'd sketch ideas on napkins during their dinner dates. Their wedding was simple but full of joy. Maya's parents worried about their daughter marrying a struggling entrepreneur, but she believed in him completely. They moved into that small apartment, turning the second bedroom into Raj's office. Maya took extra jobs to support them while he built his company. Every small victory was theirs to share. The first investor who said yes, their first office space, their first successful product launch. As success came, things started changing gradually. The apartment became a house, then a mansion. Their old furniture was replaced with expensive pieces Maya didn't even like. Raj's company, TechVision, grew from 10 employees to hundreds, then thousands. Business magazines started calling him the next big thing in tech. Their simple date nights turned into charity galas and business dinners. Maya adapted to their new life, learning to navigate high society while keeping their home feeling like a sanctuary. When she discovered she was pregnant, it felt like perfect timing. They had everything they dreamed of: financial security, a beautiful home, and now a baby on the way. The nursery was painted in soft yellows and greens, and Maya would often find Raj there late at night, talking softly to their unborn child about all his dreams for their future. But success has a way of changing people, slowly and then all at once. The warmth in Raj's eyes started getting replaced by a harder, more distant look. His phone was always ringing, always demanding his attention. Board meetings ran late, and business trips grew longer. The morning walks they used to take together became solo adventures for Maya, her hand resting on her growing belly, wondering where her husband's mind was wandering. The big house started feeling empty despite its size. Their dining table, meant for family gatherings, mostly served as Raj's second office, covered in contracts and spreadsheets. Maya noticed how he'd check his phone even during doctor's appointments, how his responses became shorter, more distracted. The pregnancy updates she excitedly shared were met with quick nods, and "That's great, honey," as he typed away on his laptop. Still, Maya held on to hope. She arranged surprise lunch deliveries to his office, left little notes in his briefcase, and kept him updated about their baby's development through sweet text messages. When TechVision's stock price hit record highs, she organized a small celebration at home, just the two of them, like old times. But Raj spent half the evening on conference calls, the champagne going flat in his untouched glass. Their story was splashed across business magazines. The brilliant CEO who built a tech empire from nothing, now worth billions. Photos showed them at industry events, Maya's pregnancy glow hidden behind designer dresses, Raj's arm around her, but his eyes often focused elsewhere. The articles praised his vision, his drive, his incredible rise to success. None of them noticed the growing distance between the power couple or how Maya's smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. As her 6th month of pregnancy approached, Maya tried to ignore the whispers about TechVision's aggressive expansion plans, the rumors of hostile takeovers, and the countless meetings that kept Raj away from their Lamaze classes. She focused instead on preparing for their baby's arrival, hoping that becoming a father would remind her husband of what truly mattered in life. The sunny nursery waited, filled with hopes and dreams, while its future occupant grew stronger each day beneath Maya's heart. But storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, unseen by the young couple caught in the whirlwind of success. Their true test was yet to come, and the price of ambition would prove far steeper than either of them could have imagined. The warning signs started small, like raindrops before a storm. Maya first noticed the change during their wedding anniversary dinner, a reservation she'd made months in advance at the same rooftop restaurant where they'd celebrated their engagement. She sat alone for 2 hours, watching her husband's untouched water glass gather condensation while messages went unanswered. When Raj finally called, his voice was distracted, distant. "Emergency board meeting," he explained quickly. "You understand, right?" She did understand, or at least she tried to. But this wasn't an isolated incident anymore. The morning coffee they used to share on their balcony, watching the sunrise paint the sky in gentle colors, became a solo ritual. Maya would sit there, one hand resting on her growing belly, the other holding her phone, scrolling through business news to glimpse what was keeping her husband so busy. Tech vision was everywhere in the headlines. Tech giant approaches market dominance. Industry leaders fear tech vision's aggressive expansion. Kumar's vision reshapes digital landscape. Each article painted Raj as a brilliant strategist, a visionary leader. None mentioned the empty side of their bed at night, or how his clothes in the closet were gathering dust because he rarely came home to change them anymore. The house staff noticed too. Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper who had been with them since the early days, would leave Raj's favorite dishes in the warming drawer, only to sadly pack them away untouched the next morning. "He's too thin," she would mutter in Mandarin, shaking her head as she prepared Maya's prenatal smoothies. A man needs to be proper food, not just ambition. Their doctor's appointments became a lonely affair. Maya sat in waiting rooms filled with couples, trying not to notice the loving partners who attended every checkup, who got excited about ultrasound images and heartbeat recordings. Raj's assistant Prina would appear instead, tablet in hand, efficiently taking notes but unable to share in the emotional moments that should have belonged to a father-to-be. One particularly difficult morning, after another night of pregnancy discomfort and worry, Maya found herself in Raj's home office. Everything was perfectly organized, sticky notes arranged by color, files labeled meticulously. A photo of their wedding day sat on his desk, but it was partially hidden behind a stack of contracts. As she moved them aside to see their younger, happier faces, her eye caught a document title, "Proposed Acquisition of Rival Tech, Hostile Takeover Strategy." The amount of money mentioned in those papers made her head spin. Billions of dollars in play, thousands of jobs at stake. This was what was keeping him away, not just work, but a corporate war. She remembered the small tech company they'd started in their apartment, how Raj had promised to create technology that helped people, that made the world better. When had it become about destroying competition instead? The baby kicked, as if sensing her distress. Maya had started talking to their child alone now, sharing stories about the father Raj used to be. "He has such a good heart," she would whisper, rubbing her belly gently. "He's just lost his way a little. He'll come back to us." But the distance kept growing. Their phones became a symbol of it. Hers filled with ignored messages and declined calendar invites, his constantly buzzing with calls from lawyers, board members, and investment bankers. Even Raj's mother noticed the change during her weekly video calls. "Beta," she said one evening, her face creased with worry on the screen, "success means nothing if you're too busy to enjoy it with your loved ones." The breaking point came during what should have been a routine pregnancy checkup. Maya's blood pressure had been concerning, and the doctor wanted both parents present to discuss precautions. Raj had promised to attend, really promised this time. Maya sat in the doctor's office, watching the clock tick past their appointment time, hope fading with each passing minute. When Prina walked in instead, tablet ready as usual, something broke inside Maya. That evening she waited up for him, determined to have a real conversation. The house was quiet except for the distant sound of waves from the beach below their property. When Raj finally came home past midnight, his tie loosened and eyes glued to his phone, Maya spoke up. "Do you even remember what color we painted the nursery?" He looked up, startled by both her presence and the question. The pause before he answered told her everything she needed to know. The man who had once spent hours debating the perfect shade of yellow for their baby's room couldn't even remember it now. "We need to talk," Maya said softly, her hand protectively covering her belly. "Really talk, Raj. About what's happening to us." But even as she spoke, his phone buzzed again, and she saw his eyes flicker toward it instinctively. The storm clouds that had been gathering were about to break, and neither of them was prepared for the deluge that would follow. The morning everything changed started like any other. Maya woke up alone, the sun streaming through their bedroom windows, painting patterns on the empty pillow beside her. She'd grown used to the silence, but today felt different. The baby had been unusually quiet, and a nagging discomfort had settled in her lower back. When the first sharp pain hit, she wasn't too worried. At 7 months pregnant, some discomfort was normal. But something in her heart told her this wasn't right. She called Dr. Singh, who asked her to come in immediately. Her hands shook as she dialed Rave's number, praying he would answer this time. To her surprise, he picked up on the second ring. But before she could explain, he jumped in. "Maya, I'm heading into the most important meeting of my career. Rival Tech is vulnerable. Their stocks are dropping, and we can take control today. Can I call you back?" The baby, Maya managed to say through another wave of pain. "Something's wrong. Dr. Singh wants to see us right away." There was a long pause on the line, the kind that stretches time like taffy. "I'll send Priya," Raj said finally. "She'll take notes and keep me updated. This deal, it's worth billions. If we don't move now, our competitors will." Maya sat on their bedroom floor, one hand pressed against her belly, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Your son or daughter might need surgery," she whispered. "Don't you understand? This is our baby." Mrs. Chen found her there minutes later, helped her up, and insisted on calling Raj's mother. Within an hour, his mother arrived, her face drawn with worry and disappointment in her son. "I'm raised in better than this," she muttered as they drove to the hospital. Meanwhile, across town, Raj sat in his glass-walled office, surrounded by lawyers and investment bankers. Numbers flashed across screens: stock prices, profit projections, market shares. His phone buzzed constantly with updates from Priya at the hospital, but he kept dismissing them. Just one more hour, he told himself. One more signature. One more deal. His mother's call he couldn't ignore. "Your wife is going into emergency surgery," she said, her voice sharp with anger and fear. "The doctors need your consent for a risky procedure." "They need you care now." Raj looked at the papers in front of him, documents that would cement his position as one of the most powerful tech levers in the world. The lawyers watched him expectantly. His competitors were circling. Everything he'd worked for hung in the balance. "Send our legal team to handle the hospital paperwork," he told his assistant. "I need to finish this." In the hospital, Maya lay in the pre-op room, monitors beeping steadily around her. Dr. Singh explained the situation. The baby was in distress, and they needed to perform a delicate procedure. There were risks, decisions to be made. "Where is your husband?" she kept asking, looking at the door. Raj's mother held Maya's hand, her traditional bangles clicking softly as she stroked her daughter-in-law's arm. "Focus on the baby," she said softly. "That's all that matters right now." The hospital walls felt like they were closing in. Outside the room, lawyers in expensive suits consulted with doctors in white coats, discussing liability and consent forms. Priya stood in the corner, typing rapidly on her tablet, trying to convey the gravity of the situation to her boss. Back in his office, Raj was about to sign the final acquisition papers when his eye caught a photo on his desk. It was from last Christmas, Maya laughing as she hung a tiny baby booty on their tree, her face glowing with joy and hope. For a moment, the pen hovered over the paper. His phone lit up with another message from Priya. "Doctor says next 30 minutes critical. Decision needed now." The room full of executives and lawyers waited, watching their watches, knowing their window of opportunity was closing. Millions of dollars hung on every minute of delay. Raj looked at the photo again, then at the papers, then at his phone. In that moment, he faced the clearest choice of his life and made the wrong one. "Let's finish this," he said to the waiting room, picking up his pen. "Our legal team can handle things at the hospital." As he signed his name with a flourish, applause broke out around him. Handshakes were exchanged, champagne was poured. Raj had won. His company would now be unstoppable. But across town, in a quiet hospital room, monitors began to beep more urgently. Doctors rushed in, speaking in rapid, concerned voices. Maya's grip on her mother-in-law's hand tightened as tears rolled down her cheeks. In that sterile room, as medical decisions were made by lawyers instead of a loving husband, everything changed. The price of ambition was about to become brutally clear, and no amount of money or success would ever be enough to undo this moment. The champagne in Raj's office had barely stopped flowing when the first frantic call came through. The celebration around him suddenly fell silent as he watched his mother's name flash across his phone screen. His hand trembled slightly as he answered, remembering he had dozens of missed calls from her over the past 2 hours. "The baby's heartbeat is dropping," his mother's voice cracked through the speaker. The room's celebratory atmosphere evaporated instantly. "Where are you?" "The doctors need you. They need decisions only a parent can make." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Raj looked around his office, at the congratulatory faces now turned concerned, at the half-empty champagne glasses, at the signed contracts worth billions lying on his desk. None of it seemed real anymore. He ran to his private elevator, his suit jacket forgotten, his tie loose around his neck. His driver broke every speed limit getting to the hospital, but time had become a cruel enemy. Each red light felt like an eternity. Each minute stuck in traffic was another minute he couldn't get back. The hospital corridors stretched endlessly before him as he ran, following the signs to the surgical wing. The squeak of his expensive shoes on the polished floor echoed off the walls. A nurse looked up as he burst through the doors, his face wild with fear. "Mr. Kumar," she asked, recognition dawning in her eyes. "Please wait here. I'll get Dr. Singh." The waiting room was a torture chamber disguised as a peaceful space. Soft music played from hidden speakers while Raj paced, his mother's eyes following him with a mix of anger and pity. The television mounted on the wall was showing business news, his company's historic takeover making headlines. He wanted to scream at them to turn it off. Dr. Singh appeared, still in surgical scrubs, her face grave. "Mr. Kumar, we needed you here 2 hours ago. Your wife developed severe complications. The baby was in distress, and we needed immediate authorization for a specialized procedure." The words hit him like physical blows. "But my legal team, they were here to handle everything," he stammered. "Some decisions can't be made by lawyers," Dr. Singh said quietly. "We needed a father's consent. We needed you." The floor seemed to sway beneath his feet. "Maya," he whispered. "The baby? Your wife is in recovery." The stress and delay caused her blood pressure to spike dangerously. "We had to perform an emergency C-section." Dr. Singh paused, choosing her words carefully. "The baby, we did everything we could." Time stopped. The soft music, the distant hospital announcements, the beeping of machines, everything faded away. Raj felt his knees give way, and he sank into a chair, his mother's small hand coming to rest on his shoulder. "Can I see them?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Maya's parents are with her now," Dr. Singh replied. She asked not to see you." The words echoed in his head as he sat there, surrounded by the sterile hospital walls that had witnessed his greatest failure. His phone kept buzzing. Congratulatory messages about the takeover pouring in from around the world. Each notification felt like a mockery now. His mother sat beside him, her silence heavier than any words could be. After what felt like hours, she spoke softly in their native language, her words carrying the weight of generations. "When your father died, he left us nothing but his good name and his values. You have billions now, but today you lost something far more precious." Through the window, he could see the sun setting over the city. Somewhere in this building, Maya lay grieving alone, surrounded by her family, while he sat in the waiting room like a stranger. The empire he'd built, the deal he'd just closed, none of it could turn back time or fix what he'd broken. A nurse walked past, pushing an empty bassinet. The sight of it made his chest tighten with a pain he'd never known before. In his pocket, his phone buzzed again, probably another congratulatory message about becoming one of the most powerful men in tech. But sitting there in that sterile hospital waiting room, watching the empty bassinet disappear around a corner, Raj Kumar, the billionaire tech mogul, had never felt more powerless. The night grew darker outside the windows, but he couldn't bring himself to leave. Security guards walked past, giving him questioning looks. They probably recognized him from magazine covers and news reports. But tonight, he wasn't the powerful CEO who'd just closed the biggest deal in tech history. He was just a man who'd made the worst choice of his life, sitting in a hospital waiting room, hoping for a chance to say, "I'm sorry" to his wife, knowing those words would never be enough. The days that followed passed in a blur of gray. Maya stayed in the hospital, surrounded by flowers she didn't want to look at and cards she couldn't bear to read. Her room was on the top floor, where the city's wealthiest patients stayed, but all the luxury in the world couldn't ease her pain. The private suite felt more like a prison of grief than a place of healing. Every morning, she would wake up hoping it had all been a terrible dream, only to feel the physical pain of her surgery and the deeper ache of her empty arms remind her that it was real. The nurses spoke in hushed tones around her, their gentle eyes full of sympathy she couldn't stand to see. Ray tried to visit every day, but Maya's parents had become protective guardians at her door. Her father, who had once looked at Raj with such pride, now stood like a stern sentinel, turning him away with quiet but firm words. "She's not ready," he would say, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Give her time." The nursery at home remained untouched, a pristine monument to what should have been. Mrs. Chen had quietly covered the furniture with white sheets, like ghosts of their future that would never be. She found Raj there one night, sitting in the rocking chair they had chosen together, holding a tiny pair of unworn booties in his trembling hands. The medical report lay on Maya's hospital table, its clinical language attempting to explain the unexplainable. Words like preventable and critical time window jumped out from the pages, each one a dagger in Raj's heart. The doctors had been clear. His presence could have made the difference. His immediate consent could have allowed them to try an experimental procedure that might have saved their child. Maya's mother stayed by her daughter's side, brushing her hair like she used to when Maya was small, singing soft lullabies that now brought tears instead of comfort. "Let it out," she would whisper as Maya cried. "Don't keep it inside." But Maya's grief was too vast to release. It had become a part of her, as real as her own heartbeat. The business world continued to buzz about TechVision's historic takeover, but the headlines now carried a darker undertone. Family tragedy strikes tech billionaire, and the price of success. Kumar's personal loss filled the news feeds. Raj's phone eventually stopped ringing as word spread that he had disappeared from public view. In the quiet hours of early morning, when the hospital halls were at their most still, Maya would sometimes walk to the maternity ward, drawn there by a force she couldn't explain. She would stand at the window, looking at the newborns in their bassinets, each one wrapped in pink or blue, their futures still unwritten. The glass reflected her pale face, marked by tears she didn't realize were falling. A kind nurse found her there one night and sat with her, not speaking, just being present. After a long silence, Maya whispered, "We were going to name her Area." It was the first time she had spoken the name aloud, the first time she had shared this piece of her heart with anyone since the loss. The nurse simply held her hand as Maya finally spoke about her daughter, about the dreams that would never come true. Back at their mansion, Raj slept in his office when he slept at all. The house felt too big, too empty, too full of memories of Maya's laughter and their shared dreams. His mother had moved in temporarily, leaving meals outside his door that went largely untouched. She would hear him late at night, pacing, his footsteps echoing through the hollow halls. The doctor's words haunted him. "If you had been here, if we had your consent right away." The weight of those ifs was crushing. His business victory, which had seemed so crucial just days ago, now felt like a cruel joke. The papers he had signed, sealing his company's dominance, were stained with the invisible cost of his choice. Maya's recovery was slow, her body healing faster than her heart. The hospital staff began talking about discharge plans, but the thought of going home to the nursery she had lovingly prepared was unbearable. Her parents had already arranged for her to stay with them in her childhood room that still held memories of simpler, happier times. One evening, as sunset painted the hospital room in soft orange light, Maya finally read one of the cards on her bedside table. It was from Raj's mother, written in shaky handwriting. "Some wounds time cannot heal, but remember that grief shared is grief halved." Maya closed the card and, for the first time in days, asked the nurse to call her lawyer. The medical staff had begun to recognize Raj, no longer as the powerful CEO, but as the man who spent hours in the waiting room, hoping for news of his wife. They watched him leave each evening, his shoulders bent under the weight of regret, his expensive suit wrinkled from another day of waiting in vain. No one mentioned the business news anymore or congratulated him on his success. They understood now that he was just a man who had lost everything that truly mattered, learning too late that some choices can never be undone. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered to Rage's office in a plain manila envelope. He sat at his desk, staring at Maya's signature, remembering how she used to leave little love notes in his briefcase. Now her handwriting marked the end of their story. The news broke like wildfire through the tech world. TechVision's stock dropped as investors questioned their CEO's judgment. Board members called emergency meetings, concerned about the company's image and leadership. The same business channels that had praised his brilliance now ran endless analyses of his personal failure. Maya had moved back to her parents' home, taking nothing from the mansion except her personal belongings and a tiny pair of unworn baby shoes. Her mother had packed up her clothes while she was still in the hospital, unable to face returning to the house she had once made a home. The nursery door was locked, untouched, becoming a shrine to what might have been. The press camped outside both houses, the mansion where Raj retreated into isolation and the modest family home where Maya sought refuge. Photographers caught glimpses of her parents, shielding her on brief walks in their garden, her face hidden behind dark glasses, her body still recovering from surgery. The photos ran with headlines like, "Tech Titan's wife seeks divorce," and "Billion-dollar baby, the true cost of success." Inside his office, Raj watched his empire begin to crumble. Major clients, concerned about the company's stability, started pulling their contracts. The hostile takeover that had seemed so crucial now felt hollow as partnership deals fell through. His assistant Priya, who had witnessed everything, finally handed in her resignation. "Some things," she said quietly, placing her keycard on his desk, "are more important than success." The board called a vote of no confidence. Members who had once praised his aggressive business strategy now questioned his decision-making abilities. A man who would abandon his family in crisis cannot be trusted to lead a global corporation, one board member stated in a leaked email that went viral. Mrs. Chen continued to maintain the empty mansion, but even she had grown distant. One morning, as she placed his untouched breakfast tray outside his study, she spoke through the door in her accented English. "In my culture, we believe ancestors watch over family. What will you tell your daughter when she asks why business was more important than her life?" The words hit harder than any headline or stock market crash. That evening, Raj found himself driving to the temple where he and Maya used to pray together. The same priest who had blessed their wedding now watched him sit alone in the gathering darkness, head bowed under the weight of consequences. Maya's healing took a different path. She started attending a grief support group, sharing her story with others who understood the depth of her loss. Among them, she didn't have to explain why certain songs made her cry, or why she couldn't bear to see pregnant women. They just knew. One rainy afternoon, she gathered the courage to read the medical reports again. The timing jumped out at her, 20 crucial minutes when the doctors needed a decision, 20 minutes while Raj was signing the takeover documents. 20 minutes that changed everything. The company's lawyers tried to negotiate a quiet settlement, offering huge sums to avoid a public divorce. But Maya's response, through her attorneys, was clear: some things can't be paid for. She asked only for support for a foundation she wanted to create, helping families facing high-risk pregnancies. Raj's mother, torn between loyalty to her son and love for her daughter-in-law, became the quiet bridge between them. She delivered Maya's things from the mansion, including a memory box of ultrasound pictures and baby shower cards that Maya hadn't been ready to face in the hospital. With each visit, she carried the weight of messages unspoken between the couple. The tech world that had once celebrated Raj's ruthless business acumen now used him as a cautionary tale. Business schools added his story to their ethics curriculum. Young entrepreneurs pointed to his choices as what not to do. His name became synonymous with the price of putting profit over people. In their separate spaces of grief, both Maya and Raj faced the ghosts of their shared dreams. She would wake up reaching for her belly, phantom kicks reminding her of what was lost. He would find himself in the empty nursery at night, the moonlight casting shadows on the covered furniture, wondering how he could have been so blind. The autumn air grew crisp as leaves changed color and fell. Maya's mother watched her daughter slowly begin to smile again, though her eyes held a sadness that never quite left. Meanwhile, Raj's empire continued its slow collapse, board members jumping ship as the company's value plummeted. But in the quiet moments when his phone finally stopped ringing, he realized he no longer cared about the billions slipping through his fingers. He had already lost what was truly priceless. 5 years passed like a slow turning page. The mansion that had once symbolized success was sold, its proceeds donated to Maya's foundation for high-risk pregnancy support. The nursery furniture found new homes with families who needed it, though Maya kept the tiny shoes she never got to use, tucked away in a box of memories. Raj had stepped down from TechVision, his resignation letter acknowledging what everyone already knew: some costs are too high to bear. The company he had built from nothing was now run by others, its aggressive expansion plans replaced by ethical business practices. His billions stayed in his accounts, untouched, like dust gathering on unused dreams. The foundation Maya started became her purpose. She threw herself into helping other families, ensuring no other parent would have to choose between work and being there for their child. The waiting rooms she furnished in hospitals were warm and comforting, unlike the cold space where she had spent those crucial hours alone. On a quiet spring morning, Raj visited the temple where they had once prayed together. The priest, older now but still wise, found him sitting in the same spot he had occupied so many nights after the tragedy. "You've done much to help others," the priest said gently. "But have you forgiven yourself?" The question followed Raj as he walked through the city streets. His designer suits were replaced by simple clothes, his sleek sports cars sold for practical ones. The business magazines that had once tracked his every move now barely mentioned his name, except in articles about corporate responsibility and work-life balance. At a charity gala for the foundation, their paths finally crossed again. Maya stood at the podium, confident and composed, speaking about the importance of family over fortune. Her words reached into every corner of the ballroom, touching hearts and opening wallets. In the back of the room, Raj listened, anonymous among the crowd. She had remarried the previous year, to a kind-hearted pediatrician who attended every doctor's appointment with her, who understood why she kept a small box of baby shoes, who held her through the difficult anniversaries. Their own child was due in the summer, and this time, every milestone was celebrated with the attention it deserved. After her speech, Maya spotted Raj across the room. Their eyes met briefly, years of unspoken words passing between them. He saw the gentle swell of her pregnancy, protected now by a husband who understood what truly mattered. She saw the gray in his hair, the weight of regret that had aged him beyond his years. The foundation's work expanded globally. Hospitals implemented new policies about parental presence during emergencies. Companies revised their leave policies, putting families first. Raj's story became a lesson in business schools, but not the one he had once hoped for. Students learned about the true meaning of success, about choices that could never be undone. His mother, who had watched it all unfold, finally spoke her piece during one of their weekly dinners. "You lost everything," she said, serving him the comfort food of his childhood, "but in losing, you found your humanity again. Some lessons come at a terrible price." The garden where he now spent his days was nothing like the manicured lawns of his former mansion. Here he grew vegetables and flowers, learning the patience of waiting for seeds to sprout, understanding that the most precious things in life couldn't be rushed or bought. Local children called him the garden uncle, not knowing he had once been one of the richest men in the country. In his small apartment, far from the glass towers of his past, Raj kept only one reminder of his former life: a framed photo of Maya from their early days, when success meant having enough to buy ice cream after dinner. Next to it stood a single dried rose from the nursery's flower arrangement, preserved in time like the memories of what could have been. Maya's foundation grew stronger each year, helping thousands of families through difficult pregnancies. She never spoke publicly about her personal story, but those who knew her saw how she poured her love for her lost daughter into every project, every family she helped. One day, years later, a young entrepreneur sought Raj out, asking for advice about a promising startup. Looking at the ambitious young man, Raj saw his younger self, brilliant, driven, blind to what really mattered. He took the young man to his garden and, while planting tomato seeds, shared the wisdom that had cost him everything to learn. "Success," he told the young man, "watching a butterfly land on a flower, is not about the height of your tower or the size of your bank account. It's about being there for the moments that can never come again. No deal is worth missing your child's first breath. No money can buy back lost time with loved ones. As the sun set on another day, Rage watered his garden, the simple task washing away the memories of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. In the distance, church bells rang, and he remembered Maya's words from her last foundation speech. Sometimes we have to lose everything to understand what we really had. The garden bloomed, season after season, teaching him what his money never could, that growth takes time, that nurturing can't be rushed, that the most precious things in life require presence, not presents. And somewhere in the city, in a happy home filled with children's laughter, Maya had found her peace, her tragedy transformed into hope for others, while her first daughter's memory lived on in every family the foundation helped.